Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And this week, loyal listeners, we will trust the fungus with Super Mario Brothers. Yes, we are tackling one of the most infamous movies, I think, as far as mainstream adaptations go. Before we do that, we actually just finished recording a pre-show banter over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/genrevision. And we went really into depth about our feelings and saying how we're gonna keep doing the show every week. We want to be here to amuse you, entertain you, and discuss these movies with you. And it's fun for us too. It's helping us out. If you want to hear us really go into detail about that, go over to the Patreon. It's $5 a month to get access to the entire library of additional content that we have.
We're going to continue doing pre-show banters every week while we have this extra time. I will likely be working less. Drew is not working right now because of this emerging COVID-19 situation. While we have that extra time, we're going to put it to good use. We're going to give our Patreon subscribers a pre-show banter every week.
Absolutely. We hope you'll join us because those pre-show banters end up producing some really great conversations and allow us to go a little off book.
Yeah.
We know this is a tough time for some people, but if you want to help us out, go check out the Patreon. It really is going to be even more important than it has been, and its importance has been literally keeping the show going. If you like what we're doing, please go over to the Patreon, patreon.com/genrevision. We also want to mention that we got some reviews. We asked for reviews in our episode of The Boxer's Omen, and you guys came through. Thank you so much. We got a review from user Birds in Boxes who says, "Listen to this show, 5 stars, it rules. Love when it's a pick I haven't seen and my movie-going experience isn't complete until I hear these guys speak on a newer genre flick."
Hell yeah.
The hosts are charming and funny. Thank you very much. Can't recommend more. Great show. Wow. Thank you so much, Birds in Boxes. We also got another one from listener Ian the Geek who says, "No more movie stores? No problem. 5 stars. Where do you discover new flicks, especially the offbeat ones? Where do you hear about how on earth some movie madness was made? Try Genre Vision, a podcast that's like hanging out with a couple of movie store clerks who know it all, enjoy it all, and love to instill passion in others.
Aw.
I've discovered countless cinema oddities through this dangerous duo. Ho ho.
Damn.
And I can't wait to see what next they can find on the shelves." Wow, that's super encouraging because, you know, we love doing popular stuff on here, but the fact that we can act as a discovery machine for listeners really makes our day. Thank you so much, Ian the Geek. And the last one we got from Tobias Carlson from Sweden. It's awesome. Hello. It's cool to have a listener in Sweden who says, "Great podcast. 5 stars. I love this podcast." Thank you so much, Tobias. You guys, if you can drop a review for the show on iTunes, it really helps us out, and we promise to feature it here on the show. So thank you to all these new reviews, and we hope to have some more to read off to you next week.
Yes, thank you.
We also are going to be having a new episode of Finflix debuting on the film It Came From Beneath the Sea. We did some really fun stuff in the recording, and the production polish that you put on that, Travis, is absolutely stellar and just put a big grin on my face.
Thank you. I will say it's one of our more ambitious productions, but this and Jaws 3D, our Finflix, I think the production has gotten way more involved in this, and I'm proud to see it do so well.
Mm-hmm. But now, a little behind the scenes. This is a movie that Travis has been talking about wanting to do on the show for quite a while. And it's always been like, yeah, I'm up for revisiting that, and we'll find a way to do it. And eventually the time came. I definitely saw this when I was very young, but it's always been a movie that I found far more fascinating than I ever actually found enjoyable or interesting. And in the intervening years, so much has come out about the production of this movie and how much of a terrible production it was for a lot of the actors and everything. But today, Super Mario Brothers has developed, I would say, something of a minor cult following.
I mean, it certainly has, I think, attained a level of infamy that I think dominates the conversation about it, because it's this infamously bad box office bomb. production that nearly fell apart. And John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins and Dennis Hopper have all been quoted saying horrible things about the production, that nobody got along and the directors treated people poorly. And, I'm kind of understating, the negativity here. People did not have fun making this movie. And the rabbit hole goes way deeper on that. It turns out like the project was pretty, troubled from the start, even in pre-production. So the fact that this has attained a level of infamy is probably largely due to the fact that this information became available. Had it not, had people kept their mouths shut about how disastrous the production was, it might be kind of a minor cult movie. But, we saw something happen with similar, I think, with Last Jedi, where, Mark Hamill was talking about, how he disliked certain things about the direction his character was being taken in that movie. And, a bunch of people latched onto it as like, see how bad the movie is. And
well, it's interesting. I think that the thing that we haven't mentioned about Super Mario Brothers infamy is that it's the Super Mario Brothers.
It's the most popular video game property of all time.
Obviously, Mario has just become a staple in video game canon at this point, but it's really difficult to exactly capture how big Super Mario Brothers were at the time this movie came out in terms of a pop culture phenomenon. It's insane how huge it was. And this movie comes out and is so radically opposed to what people saw in the video games. And just, I think, as removed of the video games as what was supposed to be a fun family fantasy adventure movie, it ends up being this weird, dark, abrasive, bizarro take on the material, and audiences pretty flatly rejected it.
They did. I mean, this was the first big live action blockbuster video game adaptation. And it's a very important one because of look at the property. It's Nintendo's Golden Boy or Golden Boys. So for this movie to try to adapt a property for the big screen and for it to go in such a bizarre direction and kind of miss what audiences around the world love about Super Mario and all the games, it's so bold and stupid an idea to do that. But I feel like people who reject this movie outright now, just because it doesn't nail what they like about Mario as a property, are missing out on a pretty, exciting experience.
And I think we can talk about that as we get into the actual movie, because the opening of the movie has some studio logos. We see Leitmotiv, Allied Filmmakers logo, and the Super Mario Brothers theme is playing. And immediately you're like, oh, the familiar, pangs of childhood. And immediately after that fades away, shit gets weird right out the gate.
So we hear the first strains of the Alan Silvestri score, and we see this digital junglescape, that talks about prehistoric times. And then somebody in a thick New York accent is doing a voiceover about dinosaur times. Turns out it's fucking Dan Castellaneta, the voice of Homer Simpson. Why is he doing the voiceover in this movie? Also, turns out, as per usual, with, movies that have confusing sci-fi premises that have troubled productions, they get this VO at the beginning to try to explain to the audience what happens. And so just within the first few seconds of things happening in the movie, it tells us the whole conceit of like a meteor struck and the force was so powerful, it created sort of a weak point between two dimensions. And there was one dimension where the dinosaurs survived and one dimension where they were wiped out.
Yes, and the dimension where they survived, they eventually evolved into humanoids, and mammals did not survive that evolution. And that's kind of said, as Dan Castellaneta says, like, but what if they found a way back? And then, boom, the title comes up. And you said this, that title is a great, really industrial, cool metal and sort of video gamey design.
Sure. I mean, movies in the 90s had awesome intertitles where the title of the movie shows up on the screen, and usually there's this like big impactful boom. It's pretty fucking cool. And this movie is sort of continuing that tradition of 90s movies having just awesome titles on screen. just within the next few minutes, it becomes apparent that this is a movie with a really distinct vision. So I think it says 20 years ago.
In the prologue, it says Brooklyn 65 million years ago.
Right.
We get the meteor hitting in the title. Then we see Brooklyn 20 years ago. And this is where we see a woman running in the rain. She's carrying a baby and she's dropping it off at some nun factory.
I think they call that a nunnery or a choich in Brooklyn. But she's wearing a really distinct costume. And this is a motif you continue to see throughout the movie. It's spiked pauldrons.
Well, buddy, we're going to talk about costumes. But already it's like, okay, this is a familiar beat that we understand. Okay, we're dropping off a baby and this baby must be important. And we know not only from stock scenes that it's important, but also because the baby is in a weirdo looking futuristic pod and there's a special crystal rock that's put into the pod.
Well, it's not like they drop off just a baby. In this pod is a fucking egg. A huge egg. I mean, and it's such a strange moment to see this like giant egg hatch and like pulse and like these membranes. Already it's like there's a ton of like goopy practical effects work in this movie.
Oh, it's cool.
And yeah, exactly. It never looks bad, like in terms of the animatronics and the practical wet effects. Like it's doing a pretty good job, even in just first couple minutes.
Wet effects just sounds dirty, but
this movie's pretty goopy and wet. I mean, I think you can agree.
We'll get to just how wet it is. So, but right from the get-go, after this weirdo digital cartoon opening, when this starts, it's abrasively dark out the gate where you're like, I can see just this opening credits sequence turning parents and some kids off being like, this is Mario Brothers? Because it's, like you said, it's dark, it's raining, it's this tragic opening to a parent having to drop off their child, and this woman, after dropping this egg baby off, runs into the sewers and is then captured by Dennis Hopper, which we would all be terrified of. Like, this is something that could open a horror movie.
Sure, and it's kind of built around this fascinating idea of like, what if this beautiful woman disappeared into the sewers on a rainy night in Brooklyn? You know, and that's kind of unsettling and strange. Or like, what if a woman dropped off a baby at a convent and turns out the baby was a giant egg? Like, what the fuck? And turns out the baby is also dropped off with a kind of triangular shaped crystal, almost like a cone shaped crystal, something that's small enough that it could be worn around somebody's neck.
But then we flash forward to Brooklyn now. And we get introduced to the Mario brothers, Mario, and Luigi Mario, played by Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo.
We're introduced to them by kind of seeing their apartment first. And one of the things we first see is several plungers mounted on a wall. These men take plunging and plumbing very seriously.
I mean, this is a thing with this entire movie where it's like, okay, what do we know about Super Mario Brothers and how can we integrate it into this take? And really, the fact that we just recently did an episode on Dragon Ball Evolution, I think that and this movie have similar kind of brainwaves about how to take things people know about this property and adapt it into our version of the movie, where it's like, well, people know Mario goes down the pipe, so he's a plumber. And I guess he's a plumber in some of the cartoons and stuff. It's like, okay, let's go full tilt with the plumber stuff. And
right.
This display of like samurai sword plungers like on the wall.
Well, this is the entire sort of decision-making process behind this movie. It's like, how can we take surface elements that people recognize from the Mario games and sort of build a quote-unquote realistic base for this to take place? Like, it's not comfortable with magic. Mm-hmm. In the game, for instance, Mario throws fireballs. Characters are able to throw fireballs because they eat a magical flower and it gives them the ability to throw fireballs. This movie is not content to just say, it's magic, don't worry about it. What it has to do is construct an entire dimension where all of these things have some sort of reason, or essentially have a reason to exist, you know, like.
Well, right. I mean, in this version, the fireballs are guns. They
Right.
just have guns that can shoot, that all the guns in this shoot fireballs. It's interesting that Mario as a video game is a fantasy. This is not a fantasy. It's a science fiction movie.
Yeah, one that is driven by this concept of a divergent evolution between dimensions. You know, what would happen if humanoids evolved from dinosaurs?
But before we get there, we still have this entire opening of being introduced to the Mario brothers, and they're doing some plumbing stuff, and they get beat to a job by this other company that's like really stereotypically mafia-esque.
Scapelli.
The Scapellis. And, and we also get introduced to Daisy, who apparently is some part of some archaeological dig.
Paleontological dig. She's digging up dinosaur bones in Brooklyn.
Well, and like you said, yeah, when we were watching the movie, you were like, she just walked off the Jurassic Park dig site.
Yeah, her costume is like perfectly, you know, from that era and like just of that same imagery. And the bizarre thing is this came out a month before Jurassic Park.
Which, you know, that's when you get into all that kind of insider Hollywood. Like, they just knew dinosaurs are going to be big in 93.
Dinos are hot. We got to strike while that iron is blazing. I guess there are dinosaurs in the Mario games. There are sort of reptile adjacent beings, kind
well,
of,
they're fantasy creatures. They're as much dinosaurs as dragons are.
Sure.
Like, I mean, that's something closer. But in this, it's like, no, we're going with the dinosaur thing.
It all stems from like this bizarre desire, I guess, you know, that is not explicitly stated, but is stated through so many ways. Like it's a desire to be real or to ground it in something that we know as more real than video game fantasy. It's such a strange approach to the whole, fuck it, you know, you can eat a flower and you can throw fire, or you can eat a blinking star and be invincible for a short period of time. Like here, ideas that magical just don't fly. It has to be built on some sort of strange science fiction logic.
Well, as we get into the more science fiction-y stuff, we'll get there. But we have this 20-minute build-up before we even go into the dino dimension. And I gotta say, I think this movie is pretty well paced in terms of how it wants to. We'll get to how it doles out information, but the pacing in which it does that, in which it introduces us to characters and has them moving along, I think it's actually pretty good at that.
Yeah, it does a fairly decent job of stretching itself out to a comfortable pace, not a leisurely pace by any means. But, you know, for 20 minutes to do the first act, it's like, yeah, this feels like the amount of time this should take, because it's doing a hell of a lot in that first act. It's got to give us the 65 million years bit. It's got to give this to 20 years ago bit. And then it's got to give us the whole present day Brooklyn thing. And while it's doing all of that, it's laying the stepping stones for where our characters are eventually going to go. You know, we meet these these dinosaur evolved hench people, Iggy and Spike, played by Fisher Stevens and Richard Edson. They're wandering around present day New York because they've figured out how to pass between the dimensions, and they're being told to spy on Princess Daisy. You know, she thinks she's human. She's, you know, trying to pursue a doctorate in paleontology.
Well, there's even more information in this opening.
Oh, it's a constant info dump. It just never stops. It's like women are being abducted from Brooklyn and on and on.
Well, yes, we have to see Iggy and Spike, and one of them has a newspaper that's saying, it's like, oh, this is the 5th woman that's been abducted. Somebody's out there kidnapping women. We then realize that it is Iggy and Spike trying to capture Princess Daisy because they don't know who she is.
But I never found this info dump actually throughout the entire movie, because the movie kind of never stops dumping stuff on you.
Yes.
I never found it terribly overwhelming in that the movie, you know, was piling on critical information at a rate that I couldn't process it.
No, it's not overwhelming. It's just all continuously bizarre. And for the most part, there is a simplicity, because at the end of the day, this boils down to a very simple save the princess story. That's from the video game. That's all you need to know.
That's your Mario right there.
Yes, you got to save the princess. The particulars of it, which involve this meteorite because we find out that Daisy is the egg baby from the beginning, and she has this piece of what's part of the meteorite that struck and split the dimensions. It's this piece of rock that has to be put into a portal that can then open up the world and all this stuff, and will eventually be the thing that's used to merge the dimensions back together.
Of course.
All of this, it's reiterated just enough because they know it's like, we know this is fucking weird, so we'll say it at least 3 times, like, so you know what's going on. But the movie's pacing never suffers for it. I think the info dump isn't overwhelming, but it's all still really, really bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, weird is the best adjective that the movie really deserves. I mean, it's just weird on weird on weird on weird all the time. And in a way that I find both abrasive and impressive. Like, and the movie has its sort of more mundane and naturalistic elements. Like, Samantha Mathis is who's playing Princess Daisy in this, and her performance is just strangely naturalistic. She seems very normal. And in this really kooky movie, it seems out of place. But I don't know. Again, it's this element that kind of grounds the movie, even though the movie doesn't deserve any sort of real grounding at all. Like, the Mario Brothers, played by Hoskins and Leguizamo, they're kind of elevated, silly characters, but they have chemistry together, and their sort of dynamic works rhythmically, I guess.
Well, I was going to say your note when we were talking was like, they don't not have chemistry, yeah. which is, I think, the best. It's like they're not clicking in a super great way, but they're not clicking. It's like, okay, let's get out your genre vision bingo cards, everyone. They're functional.
It is functional. And, I think ever since Leguizamo and Hoskins sort of started talking shit about the movie, and I think there's there's like a factoid out there that they used to get drunk on set all the time. I couldn't tell.
Or that Bob Hoskins broke his hand and they had to paint his cast for the rest of the shoot.
Didn't Leguizamo broke his leg or something like that? Like, this is an extraordinarily dangerous production for everybody involved.
Yeah, but I'll say this: the worst thing about Mario and Luigi is that they're not really characters, and the movie kind of succumbs to that after a point. You and I were talking about, they pretty much have to have this one specific beat 3 or 4 times in the movie where they're just running from some place to another place, and Luigi says, drive down this way or jump on this, and Mario's like, what, are you crazy? And Luigi's like, I got a feeling, Mario, you just
everybody's got tap water.
And that just has, it's like, yeah, there's no arc. There's literally, the movie tries to create an arc at the ending, which we could talk about, but it's not there.
Well, and it turns out some of that stuff was on the cutting room floor. There's sort of a family pride thing that was entirely cut from the movie. I don't know how much it would have added ever, but it's like, yeah, there was an attempt at some point to make these characters a little bit more than two-dimensional. But so yeah, I'm not the first one to make that joke. So after our characters, pursue the abducted Princess Daisy through the portal, they arrive in Dino Hatton, which is the sole megacity on a planet that is otherwise entirely alien desert. The entire world is ruled by Koopa, this awful Trumpian piece of shit.
It's terrifying. There is one shot in a police interrogation scene where Dennis Hopper, who plays Koopa, is in profile. It's uncanny how much he looks like Trump.
Not just uncanny, but like downright frightening. Like, yeah, and his character, he plays the character as a real fucking slimeball. Not like kids movie slimeball, but like real awful slimeball. Like there's definitely more than just a hint of Frank from Blue Velvet.
I mean, that's what happens when you cast Dennis Hopper. Like, he can't help. He was great at that. So, like, I mean, I will say that he's definitely one of the things about the movie that I enjoyed, is that even though, like, a lot of the characters, he's saddled with awful dialogue and just a lot of expository dialogue, the thing that this movie absolutely nails is its production. Every physical element in the movie is astounding.
Yeah. Dino Hatton is constructed in such a way, like, there's this quite obvious philosophy behind its aesthetic is like everything is designed for hostility. Like so many surfaces are just covered in spikes, not just because spikes are cool or punk or whatever, but because the world is supposed to be sharp and ugly and hostile. And it looks like you could cut yourself on pretty much any surface in the movie. You know, it's like a giant tetanus infection waiting to happen.
It's also a super, this is part of your thing about the design being geared towards hostility. As big as this one kind of Dino Hatton street is, that, you know, they got the same production designer from Blade Runner to do it. So it has that feel. But unlike Blade Runner, this set feels so claustrophobic and oppressive.
And it's a huge fucking set, too. It's not like it's claustrophobic because it's a small set.
No.
It's an enormous set. It's just jam-packed with all this hostile shit that's like throwing sparks at them. It's covered in fungus everywhere. It's disgusting.
When Mario and Luigi first get there, they're still trying to chase Daisy, and they're just running through tight crowds, these tight, like, caged corners that they get pushed into and stuff. It makes you feel boxed in and awful. And even when we get to Koopa's penthouse in the top of the Twin Towers, but the interior, just these big gray and black spikes jutting out of the walls, and it's awesome. It's so cool. I have to say, the whole penthouse set with those spikes everywhere that's probably my favorite aesthetic look in the movie.
It's an awesome set. I mean, it's not like the Mortal Kombat movie where you can tell like there are a few sets that just super cheaped out on. Like the movie had to like, you know, pick and choose where it was going to spend its money. But the production on the Super Mario Brothers movie is so much more lavish in comparison, where every set, regardless of whether it was completely built on a soundstage or whether it was like a location that they dressed, you know, it's all enormous and hideous, but also beautiful. You can tell that there is a philosophy and a thought and an inventiveness like behind every decision. And some of it are like sort of cheap decisions. Like there's a porn theater in the sort of main Dino Hatton set, and it's like, you know, mammal porn or whatever. It's like, what the fuck?
No. It's not porn. It's like a grindhouse theater, and it's playing a horror movie that's I Was a Teenage Mammal.
It also says XXX on the marquee.
Well, there you go. But even beyond the set, and I alluded to this earlier, the costuming on this movie is fantastic, and maybe even more so than the set, gets across a very specific aesthetic and tone to this world, especially because a lot of the villains are these higher class beings in this universe. So the way they decide to style them is so cool and tells us a lot about their characters by just looking at them.
Yeah, and the movie is incredibly fetishistic. You know, like I think I described the costumes as a blend of like 90s hip hop, fascist, BDSM fetishism, basically. Like they, you know, shortly after they arrive in Dino Hatton, Mario and Luigi are arrested and they're brought into, you know, the slammer, essentially the Dino Hatton slammer. And the cop they meet, who is played by none other than famous that guy. Gosh, what is his fucking name? I wrote it down. Don Lake, who you'll see in so many other things. But he's dressed up in what looks like a cop's uniform, but the tie is made out of patent leather. Like it's just this glossy leather tie. And I think, you know, parts of the pockets are patent leather, maybe the collar too. The hat's all like fascist patent leather. It's like
his shoulder pads are leather. Like
yeah, pauldrons and shoulder pads in this movie. Big design choice.
Yes. And we see that even in the Goombas, who are the mindless de-evolved henchmen that Koopa makes. They have these giant, just very SS looking coats with huge spikes on the shoulder pauldrons. The Goombas, as a kid, they were always the thing that I remembered the most about the movie.
Well, they're a really specific design. I mean, like really memorable. I hesitate to say iconic because
Well, they're not iconic because they all look different.
Yeah.
They have different styles of de-evolution.
Well, I mean, there's two main styles of Goomba. There's the ones with the round heads that look like a little bit more humanoid, and then there's the ones with the pointy lizard faces.
Yeah, but some of the pointy lizard faces have like weird goggles on and like all these different things. But the fact that it's these enormous hulking Frankenstein bodies with tiny heads, you know, kind of ending of Beetlejuicy, like Beetlejuicy. Sounds like
You've said it twice.
porn.
Don't you dare say it a third time.
Right. The porno version will appear. But that's the thing is like all these design choices, which obviously have been so railed against in terms of adaptation from the property, when you look at it as its own thing, as its own take, I think they're the best things about the movie.
It is absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, visionary. This is artists with a vision trying to make what they see come to life on screen. Is it ill-advised? Sure. You know what? Fuck it. Absolutely it's ill-advised
Yes.
because it's not designed to make people happy. What it is, it's basically a shotgun blast. I mean, like double barrel 12 gauge shotgun blast to the face of weird.
A fully automatic double barrel shotgun blast to the face because it never stops.
No, I mean, it's not like you get to a point in the movie where something weird happens, they explain the weird, and then they kind of move on. No, the movie continues to pile on weird on weird on weird. By the end of the movie, basically the entire thing is this huge, hideous house of cards. And it's threatening to fall apart at every second. And it never quite falls apart.
I don't know about that. There are positive things about this movie that have either, I think, been wrongly appraised because they're only being looked at from an adaptation standpoint, or they just haven't been talked about. From the adaptation standpoint, it's like all the things we said. Another one that we have to comment on as a practical effect is Yoshi in this movie. Yoshi was always a thing that I saw talked about as like it's terrible what they did to Yoshi. It's another thing of like that's not hashtag not my Yoshi. And Yoshi as a animatronic puppet and a small minor character in the movie fucking rocks.
It's awesome. Like that thing has the most valuable screen time of any character in the movie.
Yes.
Like every second it's on screen, it's like, man, this thing looks so cool. The sculpt is so beautiful. The texture of the skin looks so incredible. And the light.
It emotes.
It emotes. The texture of the teeth and the gums and the tongue. It's like, wow, I just want to reach out and touch that thing. And the way they do it's like skinny little legs, and they sort of paint out all the puppeteers. It took like 8 or 9 puppeteers to make that thing work. It's crazy.
It's fantastic. So, I mean, that's definitely one thing I wanted to go to bat for. And another thing I want to go to bat for, the thing I have never heard anybody talk about in this movie is Fiona Shaw.
Yeah, Fiona Shaw plays Lena, who I believe is a character invented for the movie. There's really no basis for her in the Mario canon, as far as I know. Then again, I don't know a whole lot about Mario, but
I don't know. She's some kind of underling. She's pretty much Koopa's number 2.
yeah, but they're in a romantic relationship together, and she sees Daisy as a threat to her position of power. And so she wants to be the one to sort of supplant Daisy and be the one to merge the dimensions and potentially rule herself. Like that's Koopa's whole motivation is to get the rock, merge the dimensions, and he becomes ruler of both Earth and, his dino realm.
Well, and Lena, she at first is, yes, I'm just threatened by Daisy and I'm going to get this rock to appease Koopa and I'll be the one to do it for him, forget this princess that he's infatuated with. And then she goes one step further and is like, you know what? Fuck Koopa. I'm going to do this. And Fiona Shaw is fucking acting like she's killing.
She's giving it her all.
Like she's sultry. She's dangerous. Sultry, I think, is an understatement. She's flat out fucking hot.
Oh yeah, no, and the costumes only serve to heighten that. I think she might be one of the few like main characters in the movie to wear a wig. Like for a movie with this like radical of a design with costumes and makeup and effects, there are relatively few wigs among the main cast. Like Dennis Hopper's crazy hair, not a wig. That's his actual hair. And the
Nuts.
same goes for Fisher Stevens. Mm-hmm. And then what's his name who plays the other henchperson, Richard Edson. Like all the main cast has these just weird hairstyles, but they're all actual hair. They had to really sit in the chair instead of just getting a wig put on them and getting, the wig dress. They had to grow their hair out like that, and their facial hair in these weird designs. Fisher Stevens had his fucking eyebrows bleached for this movie. I mean, people made commitments.
Again, I think that's the thing that has been so, chiseled away at with this movie over the years, is that these decisions are what make it bad. I don't think that's the case at all. I think these are the decisions that have helped give it longevity and uniqueness. The decisions that make the movie fail, in my opinion, all come down to storytelling.
They're the boring stuff, really. It's the stuff that people don't actually really care about to dissect. Like all the other decisions that I think a lot of people take issue with, they're things that stick out because they're different.
Well, yes, and when I should say even more so than storytelling, it's character. The reason I loved Fiona Shaw as Lena is not only because her costumes are great, her performance, she's giving the best performance in the movie. I will die on that hill. Is that she has some kind of character motivation,
yes,
an arc and commitment behind it. Everybody else simply feels like plot tools.
Sure. So the actual plot mechanics of how Mario and Luigi move around in Dino Hatton and eventually rescue the princess and on and on and on, it isn't that interesting. You know, Mario and Luigi are largely just ciphers that allow us this look into this bizarre alternate universe. They lose anything, if they ever had it, you know, that makes them interesting as characters. The delight of this movie, again, if you can find it at all, the constant shotgun blast of weirdness and things that make it different, like that's the joy. Like that's the thing that makes the movie fun for me to watch. Is it a good movie? No, but there are so many individual elements of it that add up to a really unique and, for me, like I said, exciting experience.
It's a movie I like thinking about more than I actively like watching.
I agree, yeah.
When I think about it, I think about all these things, about the production designs, every single weird, bizarro choice, because it's a movie I guarantee every time you watch it, you can pick out a new weird-ass thing that you didn't notice before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really exciting, but the actual character, the plot, all of this kind of stuff is so on the rails and is way, way, way less engaging than the world that it's taking place in.
Sure. Mad Max Fury Road is another movie that packs its weird world full of bizarre detail. It's in little close-ups of things that aren't essential to the plot. Is it essential to the plot that Nux's brake pedal says Nux on it? No, but that doesn't stop George Miller from giving us the close-up of that brake pedal that lets us know that his brake pedal says Nux on it. And in a lot of ways, the Super Mario Brothers movie takes the same approach. It just wants to blast these bizarre details in your face all the time. Like, in the streets of Dino Hatton, there aren't rats fighting over slices of pizza. It's little dinosaurs instead of rats. They're disgusting.
It's true. I mean, bringing up Mad Max Fury Road should actually bring up another thing that I think is a huge failing of the movie. For as interesting and fascinating and weird and genuinely enticing that this world is, it's not shot for it.
Agreed. So one of the things that sets this movie apart from a really immaculately shot movie like Mad Max Fury Road, you know, particularly when it comes to, you know, things that happen on sets and interiors, is the whole approach to lighting Dino Hatton wasn't really to light the characters beautifully. It's to light the spaces. So they're trying to make it look like this is a city with real functioning lights. And so nobody's really lit for beauty in their close-ups. It's all just like, okay, we're just going to let the lights from the space shine down on the actors in a way that they would if they were real people in real places. And that kind of naturalistic approach, I guess, was to sell, again, like as a realistic place, you know, to sell the gritty realism. If you know, that sounds bizarre to say, but it's true. Like it's in there. Like, why would you try to sell this as a gritty, realistic place if you're going to go that far fucking wacko?
I don't need the movie to go full creep show when it comes to lighting or anything, but even in the staging of a lot of shots, the way that the actors are blocked in a particular scene, I don't think there's anything truly dynamic going on with a lot of the filmmaking. Every once in a while, there's a few shots where, and it's usually for whatever reason, whenever they put the camera low to the ground.
Yeah, there is this shot that tilts up from Fiona Shaw's feet up to her face. It gives a close-up on her face. It's like, ooh, that's one of the best shots in the movie.
It's the reveal of when she's wearing that amazing blue dress.
Yeah, it's in the club scene where she stomps on the string that's holding the necklace. And
yes.
Yeah, so it's awesome. I mean, plus she just looks awesome in close-up. She just fucking dominates the movie. She could dominate both of us for all we care.
Well, that too. But I mean, even so, I really think that for as kooky and crazy as the world of the movie is, the fact that the filmmaking itself and a lot of the technical filmmaking aspects don't complement that kookiness only kind of pulls you out of how inert the movie actually is in its visual presentation.
Basically, the cinematic language is really pedestrian. There's not a whole lot of inventive shots or dynamic filmmaking inside when it comes to like where do we put the camera and how we edit. The movie is directed by Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton. It's a husband and wife team. I'm not sure if they're still married or not, but they're two of the original creators of Max Headroom. So they were hired because this like bold sci-fi take.
And it's creepy how much Koopa and Max Headroom really look alike.
They got the ruffles.
It's interesting because I have not seen the original Max Headroom TV movie. I've seen bits of the series over the years.
Sure, me too.
But I can't speak to the filmmaking of that, only to say it's like, well, they were music video filmmakers, you know, so I know that they can have strong stylistic choices in their filmmaking. But for this movie, and I'm sure part of that is because of how hellish the production was and the crunch and everything, it just doesn't marry well with this wackadoo vision that they have. I don't need the filmmaking to go like full Sam Raimi, but
wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is like it couldn't hurt at this point, and I think it would bolster what is on screen more than the way it's kind of utilized. And maybe that would have been doubly abrasive to audiences at the time.
That's kind of my point, is like if the filmmaking were to, you know, kind of rise in style to meet just how wacky the rest of the movie is, people might have been truly lost. But the fact that they were kind of able to approach all of these completely bizarre ideas in such sort of a plainly styled movie. And when I say plainly styled, I don't mean in the sets or the costumes. I mean just like what are the decisions they're making as far as like camera placement and lighting and all this sort of stuff. Cinematic language. If it were weirder in that regard, it might not have connected with anybody. So you mentioned earlier that this movie was wet.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to elaborate because this movie is so frighteningly horny.
It's shockingly tumescent.
It is positively swollen.
Yes, I mean, we talk about in the costume design and everything how it certainly accentuates certain parts of the female form, but there are so many times throughout the movie where things get strangely adult.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that somebody behind the camera had a thing for big-breasted dinosaur women. But yeah, it's like we mentioned with the porno theater and stuff like that. It's just a strangely grown-up place, you know, and for a kid's movie, I mean, right? Shouldn't it be a kid's movie?
Well, yeah, I think that's part of the whole repulsive nature of this thing from its release and its legacy, is that it's supposed to be a kid's movie, right? But it doesn't act or look like one. And the shocking amount of horniness in this movie, whether it's Mario dancing with a woman called Big Bertha, who is based on a giant fish from the game. In this,
forgot about that. Damn.
An Amazonian black woman in a red spiked dress.
She is this towering, glorious character in this red spiked dress with these just incredible earrings and stuff like that. It's one of the most immaculately designed characters in the entire movie.
It's one of the design elements that stuck with me from the very first time I saw this as a kid.
Because she's one of the best characters and she gets almost nothing to do. And that kind of sums up like feelings on the movie. It's just like, yeah, it's really all about the cool stuff that gets to walk through the frame in the movie, and that's about it.
But Bob Hoskins gets to bite the necklace in between her boobs trying to get it, which is like...
Yeah, Mario has the distinct pleasure of getting down with a dinosaur.
Well, there's also just the weird thing of he's trying to get the necklace from her, so he's like, oh, I'll charm her. Nobody can resist the Mario brothers' charm. And as soon as he comes up to her and says some line, she punches him in the face, and he comes back and he's just like, the way your knuckles wrap around your fist and slam into me, it's just so much. And I said to you, it was like, yeah, Mario is a bottom.
And my response was, Mario wants snoo.
Yes. So they immediately go into this whole slow dance thing and everything Fiona Shaw does, not only because she's just electrifyingly exploding with sexiness in every frame, but the dress design, the way the movie carries itself. There's also some, I don't know if we wanted to mention this, but now we're here. There's like creepy, rapey stuff with Koopa and Daisy.
Yeah, all that shit should have ended up on the fucking cutting room floor. That does not belong in this movie. It sucks. It's stupid. It's bad.
Remember, in the Super Mario Brothers movie, Dennis Hopper as Koopa
sexually menaces the princess. I mean, all of this stuff is implied. All this, I mean, granted, all this stuff is implied in the whole like Bowser abducting Princess Peach. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's all implied.
I mean, that strips things down to its most basic mythic structure of just the dragon and the princess.
But this is like Neil Gaiman's Super Mario Brothers, where he's like, yeah, actually, he's horny.
Neil Gaiman's Super Mario. That's fucking great. Koopa's an American god.
I was just thinking of that Beowulf adaptation he wrote, where he's just like, let's make it horny.
That too, yeah. I mean, so just one more thing to add on the pile of what the fuck that is Super Mario Brothers. By the end, they rescue the princess. Koopa is de-evolved into a... This is another one of those things where we didn't talk about that a lot, but the weird way they try to adapt certain things from the Mario canon into this. For example, in Super Mario World, Koopa, or Bowser, as he's more known, has this like weird flying ship thing that he floats around in that's like just a big half sphere. So in this one, there's like a crane with some kind of platform that he ends up inside of, and it's like, oh, that's that.
Oh, like, God, how strange.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, it's like, okay, Mario jumps high, so let's give them sci-fi super boots that jump really high. Bob-ombs are things. Let's make a Bob-omb a wind-up super bomb in this world, which does lead to one of Travis and I's favorite line readings when a Bob-omb shows up and Dennis Hopper just goes, Bob-omb, Bob-omb.
And there's really fun close up on his eyes. You know, you can practically hear his eyelids creaking as he squints.
Talking about his eyes real quick, one element that we haven't talked about is the effects work in this movie. Besides, you know, just Yoshi, there's a lot of face morphing and digital stuff. And I have to say, I'm kind of surprised how well it held up. Yeah,
the morphing in this clearly had a lot of money behind it. The production in general clearly had a lot of money behind it, but the visual effects, they don't get the short shrift.
There's one moment when Koopa is de-evolving, and they go through a number of different elements, a lot of them practical puppets, and there's some really cool, weirdo, creepy looking ones. But there's a couple shots where it's completely CG, and it's the CG dinosaur. It looks awful.
Oh, but it looks better than any of the computer generated 3D stuff in Mortal Kombat. So
that's right. It's not Reptile. I get that.
It's 1993, so that really explains like why the CG dinosaur in that brief moment in the movie looks not so good.
Well, it is very brief. It's not like Reptile, who they give like tons of close-ups to.
Yeah.
In Mortal Kombat, where it's just like, look at how fucking cool this thing is. Like, that looks like shit.
So I think one of the things that I had said when we were having a prior conversation about this is what the movie fails at is cartooniness. Like, and it's clearly trying for cartooniness in some aspects.
That's a great way to talk about the score.
And it fails at nearly all of its attempts to sort of capture a cartoony feeling. There's so much at odds with it being a cartoon, like the fact that it's trying to ground so many ideas in a functional thing. Like, no, they can't just jump high. They have to have boots that are powered. Like, we have to learn that the boots are powered by a cartridge that looks like Bullet Bill.
Well, like, even more so than conceptual cartooniness, the movie fails utterly at tonal cartooniness and humor. It is a vacuum of laughter. It's shocking. And to me, I think that's partially because when you have this extremely weird, dark, dystopian sci-fi take, also trying to interject a lot of, you know, down the line goofball humor and jokes and stuff, none of it ever really clicks.
Yeah, the humor does not work at all. I think there are a couple things that I laughed at in the movie, and probably not for the right reasons. The bomb thing I laughed at. I mean, that's clearly the movie saying a silly nonsense word.
Yes.
But, it's things like at one point in the movie, Koopa orders a pizza, and then like they keep trying to deliver the pizza to him. The movie thinks this is funny. It is not. But, there are more weird things, like when he orders the pizza over this like video phone system they have. The device that controls the video phone system is a gun. It's, kind of a light gun idea, another sort of Nintendo peripheral thing. But it also, it serves to complement this idea that the entirety of Dino Hatton is designed for hostility and aggression and violence. Like everything is a spike or a blade or a gun or something that can hurt you, and in that way, the movie feels hostile and aggressive and oppressive and just, like you said, abrasive, not at all a pleasing place to be.
Which again, contrasts with any attempts at lighthearted goofball humor or tone. And another element of that we haven't mentioned is the score by Alan fucking Silvestri, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
There is this one, like the Mario Brothers theme motif, and it is this straight, I mean, it could have come out as some Disney movie of the same era, where it's just this doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo thing, and it plays so much during the movie.
Like the tubas in the score going bum 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 bum. It's like, meanwhile the movie is being dark and strange, and then the score allows itself to go to dark and strange places. Like there's this motif that plays as sort of like the royalty theme, and it's this big epic minor thing with big pounding timpani and stuff like that.
It's the best piece of music in the movie,
and it's like, yeah, this feels tonally appropriate for what we're seeing. This movie had the audacity to have the king of this quote unquote mushroom kingdom. Like it's this giant ball of mucousy fungus that hangs out of the ceiling. Evidently that used to be Lance Henriksen.
Well, yeah, that he was apparently he was the king of the kingdom, but then Koopa used his de-evolution on him. He was the first one, and he de-evolved him so much that he's become this fungus that has grown throughout the entirety of Dino Hatton, but it's sentient, and it's helping out the Mario Brothers every once in a while. It's trying to give them a bomb, and it'll stretch out and save them when they fall down a pit or something. Again, another wacky goofball idea, never clicks, because at the same time, this is a dark dystopian world where there's giant propaganda posters of Koopa with a chainsaw talking about how he's an environmentalist.
Yeah. The propaganda and the fascist stuff, like again, the design behind all that and the costume, like it belongs in a really good coffee table book. Like it would make for a fascinating coffee table book.
I think if they committed more to that tonally, it would work. I mean, maybe it wouldn't work as a financial success, but I think as a creative endeavor, it would. Because that is still, to this day, and through the majority of this episode, what we've been talking about.
I mean, the fact still stands that if you're unable to see past the failed adaptation aspect of this whole narrative, then you're not going to have the kind of fun that we had, just observing the movie as a cyberpunk sci-fi movie, because that's what it is. This was my introduction to cyberpunk. I saw this way before I saw Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm. Oh, me too.
This is the first cyberpunk movie I ever saw, and it made an impression. And that impression still lingers to this day as somebody who likes cyberpunk quite a bit. I can't deny that there is some sort of formative experience for me here. But nostalgia aside, the things that have lasted in this movie, have aged really well. And even stuff that in other movies has aged really poorly, like morph effects or, dinosaur animatronics and things like that. Like, for whatever reason, there's something going very right in Super Mario Brothers, despite everything else going really, really wrong.
And that's why I come around my final summation is that it's a movie I actually have gained more and more admiration for, but from a distance. Like I'm really glad you and I watched the movie together, that we synced up our plays of it and got to talk through the movie, because I think it actually made the movie a lot more enjoyable for me. because as a story, as something with characters, as something with exciting moments, like there aren't a lot of moments in Super Mario Brothers, but the dressing of it all, the way it looks, the way it feels at times is what leaves an impression. And that impression is so strong.
I'm just thinking of John Leguizamo going, she makes an impression, huh?
That's the other thing, too, is that we didn't really linger too much on the things that do not work in the movie. And maybe that's something, because I look at the cult that this has, and a lot of the cult comes from that production design side of it. And that is something that I think needs to be reclaimed to this day. That's the good thing about this movie. It's the best thing about the movie. It's the most interesting thing. It's just, I wish the actual movie itself had more going for it.
Yeah, I mean, all that. I really think that is probably the best summation of it right there. I do wish it had a better Blu-ray release, if only to document like a gallery of concept art. I don't know.
I mean, that's the thing. I agree with the coffee table thing. I would watch a Charles Delorsica documentary about the making of this movie.
Sure.
Like, that would be fascinating to me to see the stat, and there is a good video out there on from a YouTuber called The Gaming Historian, who talks about the conceptualization and the production of it.
I don't know why the historian of the Ming Dynasty had to call himself gay, but whatever.
But yeah, Super Mario Brothers, I will be very interested to hear what you loyal listeners think about this movie, because I feel like this is becoming, as the years go on, a more divisive movie, because there are people who really like this movie, and I can see why. Like, I get it, but I think the things that are worth liking aren't what are actually have nothing to do with the story that's being told. There are creative decisions that are fascinating and interesting, but the actual story and the characters that it's using, nah. So I do think that can wrap things up on Super Mario Brothers. So we will head over to the shelf, where we pick a movie that might act as a good pairing or substitute for our main topic. And as always, we want to encourage you loyal listeners to go to genrevision.com and comment on the post of this episode. And comment on the post for this episode with your shelf picks, which we'll feature on next week's episode. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Super Mario Bros?
Johnny Mnemonic.
That's really good. We did an episode of Johnny Mnemonic versus Surviving the Game, and we professed our love for Johnny Mnemonic quite a bit.
I don't know if did I say I loved that movie? I like it.
I kind of love it.
It has Ice-T as an anarchist and Henry Rollins as a character named Spider.
Heroin addicted psychic dolphin.
Well, I think the heroin addiction part is only in the story, or it was in a prior cut of the movie. Otherwise, okay. Psychic dolphin that I think microwaves somebody to death.
Dolph Lundgren.
Dolphin Lundgren. Who plays like a Jesus-y weirdo, right?
An assassin that's Jesus themed.
See that movie.
Listen to our episode. I'm going to listen to that episode again now. I'm going to see if you said I dig that movie way. Like we definitely went to bat for it, and that's an pretty infamously disliked movie.
Yeah, like Super Mario, it's a cyberpunk movie that has its elements that are totally worth applauding. I want room service.
Great scene.
Yep, and Keanu's really just given it all of his early 90s energy. It's awesome. So what, sir, are you pulling off the shelf to recommend or perhaps offer as a substitution?
Well, I'm also going to pull a formative cyberpunk movie from my childhood that has fantastic aesthetic decisions and some, I would actually say, some pretty fun performances, but not a great story. Judge Dredd. I would say Judge Dredd is Judge Dredd is to me what Super Mario Brothers is to you. I kind of love that movie, but I still acknowledge, like, yeah, Rob Schneider's in it, and he's going full Rob Schneider. It might be one of his most annoying performances, imagine the piece of cake that takes. But there is just so much about that movie that I can't help but gawk at every time I watch it. And unlike Super Mario Brothers, I think that movie actually is shot pretty well. But I haven't watched it in a couple years, so maybe my mind will change on that. That's the one that I'm going to get on the show at some point, as you did with Super Mario Brothers, because I definitely I want to try and see if that movie is worth hanging on to, or if not, because I feel like of that era, everybody's all about Demolition Man, and I like Demolition Man, and I liked Demolition Man as a kid. But Judge Dredd was the one I always thought about visually.
I've never seen Judge Dredd in its entirety. So, yeah, we'll have to do it on the show one day.
Spam the comments, loyal listeners, with desires for me to torture Travis with Judge Dredd. So one day. But let's go to the listener shelf picks for last week's episode on Sin City, which Danny Ryan was nice enough to sub in while Travis was visiting with family. Hi, Danny.
I'll just say, y'all knocked it out of the park. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
I'm eager. If ever I have to go out of town, I know you all got this shit on lockdown. So thank you.
Thank you very much, buddy. And we got some good shelf picks. Eric Fuchs' shelf pick was Natural Born Killers, a 90s hyper-stylized film bro classic for 2000 hyper-stylized film bro classic. So, yeah, I've not revisited Natural Born Killers in probably close to 15 years. I have a feeling that if I revisit it, it will be the last time I watch that movie.
No, I haven't seen Natural Born Killers all the way through.
So that's another one maybe that we'll have to come around to. Yeah. Well, I won't. I'd rather watch Judge Dredd. Let me just put it that way. Sergei Fabricio, their shelf pick was, they had two shelf picks: Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, which I've never seen.
Me neither.
And Heavy Metal, which they were talking about. They would love to see a Heavy Metal reboot, like by Adult Swim or somebody, which I completely agree with. I think Heavy Metal is another one of those movies that it's way more interesting to talk about and to talk about the production than actually watch the movie.
I've seen Heavy Metal. I was very stoned. I don't remember.
Well, yeah, as you should be. That's kind of the purpose of that movie, is just to get weed.
But I mean, I literally don't remember the experience of watching it. I just don't. I know that I watched it at some point.
Sure. But I Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow is one I've always meant to see because it was so railed against because of its whole green screen approach to shooting. And then that has become the norm for pretty much all big fantasy, action sci-fi.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's always one I've been interested in, but I've never taken the plunge on. Ryan Covey, his shelf pick for Sin City was The Spirit, which he says he genuinely loves. He does not think it's a great movie, but it sure is an entertaining ride. And I gotta say, I saw The Spirit once. I was also incredibly stoned when I watched
all
that.
I saw was the trailers, and I thought, wow, this looks similar to Sin City. I wonder what the reviews will be like. And everybody was like, fucking avoid this thing. And I followed their advice.
I wouldn't be averse to revisiting that one. The one big thing I remember from it that isn't something I can pull from the trailers is very early in the movie, the spirit starts beating up the octopus, who is played by Samuel L. Jackson, and he's like punching him in a mud puddle, because it's Frank Miller, of course. And I mean, he is punching, it's a single sustained shot, and he punches him like 20 times. Just like, duh, duh, bah, bah. But it's so clearly for comedic effect. It might be one I'll have to check out again and see how my feelings have changed on it. And then finally, Mr. Milksteak had another two shelf picks: Zack Snyder's Watchmen adaptation and Starfish from 2018, which was one of my honorable mentions from that year.
I got about halfway through that and had to quit. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, you were not into it, which surprised me. I was like, I think this is going to be your thing, and you were like, nope, I get it, I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see. I mean, his thing is that Starfish is a movie that went all in visually, especially every time the main character played one of the cassette tapes. The anime chase sequence is really quite amazing, and the ending honestly brought me to tears. I didn't get that into it, but I'm really glad you enjoyed it. And I did think it was quite an experiment. So as always, thank you, everybody. I love that the shelf is taken off like this, and even more so that we get these listener shelf recommendations. I think that's a really cool thing that the show's integrated. let's do some currently consuming.
Nom 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
I'm hesitant to talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil anything. But I've been watching Alex Garland's new limited series for FX called Devs. This is being specifically released through Hulu. It's not airing on FX proper. It's probably just too weird, frankly. It's an extraordinarily moody and weird and bleak show in the sort of Alex Garland Annihilation vibe. You know, very, very similar tone. But it's interesting to see that kind of tone stretched out to, like, you know, so far it's 4 episodes. It's real good. The series lead is played by Sonoya Mizuno, who you might recognize as the sort of house servant robot from Ex Machina.
Oh, yeah.
She's the lead in this. She plays a character named Lily Chan, who works in the encryption department in this big company called Amaya in the Silicon Valley area. This big company is sort of like a Google stand-in that's run by Nick Offerman's character. And Offerman is this super cold, super distant, odd guy with a tragic past. And Lily is dating. She's in a long-term relationship with some other, you know, employee at the company. And in the pilot episode, he's this Russian dude named Sergey. He's invited by Nick Offerman's character to leave his department and join the devs team. And nobody who works outside the devs team is quite sure what that means. So he joins devs, and then I won't spoil what happens, but shortly thereafter, he is declared missing. Lily can't find him. And so that is the main sort of thrust of the plot of the show, is Lily trying to find out what happened to Sergey and what happened when he joined devs, and, you know, could potentially reveal the mystery of exactly what devs is doing.
Okay. I mean, I fully intend to check it out, but when I heard that it was going to be a limited series, I was like, you know what? That seems like a show I might have to take at my own pace.
I think taking it at a weekly pace is pretty good because, I don't know, if you're kind of watching a couple episodes in a row, it might be a little bit much.
Maybe. I mean, well, that's the thing is that when I say at my own pace, it may just be like, all right, I watched an episode. Do I want to keep watching? No. I'll pick it up when I want to. I had the same kind of thing with the Netflix show Maniac, where it was like, I was like, oh, I'm really liking this. I'm going to watch the next episode. And like halfway through that episode, I was like, no, I need to step away from this for a little bit.
Yeah, I watched all 10 episodes of Maniac in one day and like felt like crap.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you said directly to me, you were like, I highly recommend not doing that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to check it out. It's Alex Garland, and FX has always been really good with their kind of prestige shows. So I'm glad to hear that you're liking it.
Yeah, it's definitely Alex Garland's most art housey thing. Like, he's allowed a little bit more room to be weird and moody. And I can't argue. I think the results are quite good so far. But it doesn't move at the pace that his films do.
Okay, that's good to know.
Anyway, that's all I have to say about devs for now. What, sir, has been on your plate?
Well, real quick, I did watch The Hunt, which came out on VOD, and we're not even going to talk about all of that craziness, but I did write a review for it at the website giantfreakinrobot.com. I'm going to be doing some movie reviews there from now on, so we'll link to it in the show notes for the post for this episode if you want to go read my full thoughts on that. But more appropriately for this episode, I wanted to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog, which I saw. I'd been interested in this movie after a point. I mean, beyond all of the whole, we're going to completely redesign the character after the backlash and everything. That wasn't what interested me. What interested me was the more I saw the movie, I was like, you know, this feels like it might actually be a slightly weird movie, somewhat like the Super Mario Brothers, that's trying to jam itself into a more palatable, family-friendly delivery system, which it absolutely is. It's like, you know, this movie's kind of weird at times.
Okay, like not Super Mario Brothers weird, though.
No, well, because Super Mario Brothers is weird all the time.
Yeah.
And like Sonic just knows, like, okay, we have these absolutely ridiculous concepts of, yes, Sonic is raised by a giant talking owl that wears armor, you know, like, and how does that work when in the next scene he's chilling out with, you know, James Marsden in a car? the movie's not great, but it was surprisingly not bad either. It knows it's silly and ridiculous. Jim Carrey is allowed to do his Jim Carrey thing, so I know people's mileage will vary with that, but he seems to be having a good time, and I grew up with Jim Carrey having a good time on screen, so I can get into that. Surprisingly, I would say the best thing about the movie is Ben Schwartz's performance as Sonic. He actually is giving up performance, which is tough because it's like, look, this thing is a cartoon. I had the same issue with this as I did Pokemon Detective Pikachu, where it's like those things, they're always going to be cartoons to me. Like, there's no way, their designs are just inescapably cartoony that they're never going to mesh in a live action world.
Yeah.
The same thing happens with Sonic, but Ben Schwartz and the way that Sonic is written, because the impetus of the story is that he starts off in whatever his dimension is, and then as a kid, he has to escape into our world, and he has to keep himself hidden or else these evil people will find him. Mm-hmm. And so he grows up having to keep himself hidden and be alone. He lives in this town called Green Hills, but he's so fast that he's able to observe everybody and considers himself part of the town, but nobody knows he exists. And it gets into him being like lonely and wanting to have a friend and stuff like that. And Ben Schwartz sells the performance of that. I was shocked.
Well, I mean, at least they give Sonic some sort of like basic human motivations of like, hey, I want to have friends.
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to the Mario Brothers, which are like, what do they want to do?
Merge the dimensions. Kill all mammals.
Yeah. Monkey. So, Sonic the Hedgehog, I don't know, man. Like, I can't recommend it because it still has a lot of those typical family-friendly movie problems. Like, it's too jokey, like the Super Mario Brothers movie. It clearly can't be as weird as sometimes I think it wants to be. It's got a lot of stock scenes and stuff, but the performances aren't bad. Some of them are really good and fun. The movie moves at a decent pace, and the peaks of weirdness are really encouraging, especially by the end of the movie when it's like, yeah, this movie did really well. I think we can get really bonkers with it in the next one, and I hope they do. Because now it's like, oh yeah, people will show up for this Blue Hedgehog movie. Now we can just do whatever the fuck we want.
Frankly, I'm just astonished that it did well at all. I mean, I was not expecting this movie to do well. It seemed to have bomb written all over it, But after Detective Pikachu was alarmingly good.
Well, not just alarmingly good, but was a box office smash.
It was a box office smash. Also, kind of a weird cyberpunk movie where it was just like, you know what? We're going to keep piling on weird no matter what, and you're just going to be along for the ride.
Because you love Pokemon.
Well, and it did so in a way that was true to what people like about Pokemon, which is what sets Pokemon Detective Pikachu apart from something like Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that Sonic the Hedgehog does have a little bit of that Super Mario Brothers thing where it's like, well, Robotnik's not going to be a fat guy flying around in a ball thing, although he gets there. And then by the end of the movie, they got Jim Carrey to have a bald head and a giant cartoon mustache where it's like, that's fucking Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah. I mean, I saw it in the trailer and sure, it's Dr. Robotnik, but like, I don't know. Like every joke they had that Jim Carrey said in the trailer, I was just like, this is so painful.
that
sucks.
There is painful stuff. There is a absolutely bizarro musical dance number from him, where he's dancing to this weird, obscure 70s hippie folk song about being evil. It's insane. It's insane. That kind of stuff, when it peeks through in the movie, is like, yeah, they want to get weird with it, but they got to pull back because this still has to be a CGI anthropomorphic animal driving in a car with James Marsden movie. Like,
sure.
It's still got to be that at times, but I don't know. It was way better than I anticipated it being, but at the same time, it's not bad.
Okay, so it sounds like I can skip it, which saves me.
Yeah.
Woo, that's a load off my mind.
Yeah, wait for the sequel when it goes total batshit, which I hope it does. But let's wrap things up with our
comment of the week.
And this is from Sergei Fabrizio, who sang about the Sin City episode, says, great episode. This was absolutely from that wild time before the MCU when the comic book movie trend was totally on the way, but everyone was really playing around with how to execute it. And we talked about this a little bit in the episode, and it's one of the reasons why I still have a soft spot for Sin City, because this was at a period where comic book cinema was like, well, what can we do? Mm-hmm. That's a lot more invigorating to me than what comic book cinema has mostly become.
Well, I think there was a stage, you know, when Sin City was happening and when Sky Captain was happening. It's like, well, what is it that people like about comic books that we can replicate on screen? You know, what can we do to make these adaptations more successful and more pleasing to people? Do we replicate the style really heavily? Turns out, that created some interesting experiments, but that's not actually what people like about comic book movies.
It's so dependent because we have things like Sin City or 300, which were success. I mean, 300 was a gargantuan success.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, that is an extremely formalist, stylized approach to this material that for whatever reason people were really into.
It's masculinity. It's all about masculinity.
Well, there's that too. We can't ignore that. But then I think 2008 is the big turning point, because in that same year, from the same studio, you have The Dark Knight and Speed Racer. Like two movies that could not be more polar opposites on how to adapt these kinds of properties into films.
Yep. Dark Knight wants it as real as it can get, and Speed Racer goes as artificial as it can get.
So next week...
Turns out we've had to make some revisions to our schedule because, you know...
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about that too much because obviously with everything that's going on, theatrical movies have been pulled. We'll keep an eye out for anything, but we have had to revise our schedule. So if you go to genrevision.com and go to our schedule page, you can see some of the changes we had to make. But next week we will be doing our Dragon Versus movie with Dragonheart versus Reign of Fire. I've been meaning to rewatch both of these for years, and we finally got it onto the schedule. I think this was prompted somewhat by finding out that a Dragonheart movie released this year.
Yeah, and all the Dragonheart movies are on Netflix. Evidently, this series has been going on as long. It's like the new Tom Berenger and Sniper. What the fuck? They just never stop. Hang it up, Tom.
That's a great pull. Well, I think Tom did hang it up, and I think Billy Zane took over for a while as Sniper.
I'm Sniper now.
Yeah, I am Sniper. I have never seen a Sniper movie. I will probably never see a Sniper
One shot,
movie.
one kill, baby. Neither have I. Anyway,
yes. So
our schedule has changed. It will continue to change, and our podcast is dependent upon new release blockbuster movies to get the kind of downloads we need for this podcast to continue. There will be fewer, potentially much, much fewer blockbuster new releases at the cinema this year. We appreciate your continued listenership of the podcast. COVID-19 may not be a slate cleaner virus, as they call it, but it has definitely cleaned off the theatrical slate. Let me tell you, honey.
It has. And we always want to keep doing stuff that you all want to hear, as well as things that we are engaged in doing. And if this means creating a dialogue, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear what you think about the upcoming schedule. You can go to the schedule page and comment on it. We welcome that. We like hearing that kind of stuff.
Genrevision.com/schedule. Go there, make comments. We need to know what you all want to hear. Because there won't be as many theatrical releases to cover in 2020, we're going to need your input. So please do that. You can send us an email, genrevisionpod@gmail.com. Just tell us what it is you want to hear on the show. We are devising more theme months to fill out the schedule this year. You all requested more theme months when we did the Q&A. We're going to make it happen for you. I believe May is going to be our first theme month. Mm-hmm. And we've been toying around with some really fun ideas. We can't wait for you all to hear.
Very kooky ones that I cannot wait to figure out how we're gonna program those. I'm really excited for that day when we sit down. It's like, all right, what movies are we doing? So yes, as always, and even more so considering the times that we're living in, we want to thank you so much for listening and being a part of the Genrevision family. As always, I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
and we will see you next week.
Right here on Genre Vision.